Operatives should only use the tools or materials for which they have received authorization and training. Refer to the Information for Use (IFU) for the individual torque settings. Perpendicular purlin bracket installation. Create a datum point from a wall or a feature of the building to establish the center line for the rigid rail. A datum is a physical point or position that you decide, serving as a reference or base for the measurement of other values. Prior to installing the perpendicular purlin brackets, consideration must be given to the trajectory of the hanger link arms onto which the rigid rail will be secured. Where obstructions such as plant, equipment and services will prevent the hanger link arms from joining together to form a central fixing position for the rigid rail, repositioning of the Kee Track system or purlin brackets must be considered. Mark the purlin to reflect the center line for the rigid rail. Working from the center line, mark the offset positions for both the left and right side extremity perpendicular purlin brackets. The offset measurements, left and right, shall be taken from the Kee Track system design specification. Using a set square positioned at 90 degrees to the underside of the purlin, draw a line vertically through the offset mark. The line should extend approximately 6 inches from the bottom of the purlin. Where structural limitations will prevent the use of a set square, the perpendicular purlin bracket, positioned level with the underside of the purlin, can be used. To aid horizontal alignment of the Kee Track system, the perpendicular purlin brackets incorporate a bend above the hanger link arm fixing hole. The bend must face towards the lowest purlin relative to the roof slope onto which the bracket is being attached. Position the perpendicular purlin bracket so the central fixing holes are positioned over the line. Ensuring the perpendicular purlin bracket is orientated correctly with the bend level with or slightly below the underside of the purlin, position the bracket so the central fixing holes are directly over the offset marks. Mark the upper corner in preparation for drilling. If the perpendicular purlin bracket is positioned with the bend above the underside of the purlin, there is a risk of being unable to insert the M16 hanger link arm bolt assembly. Using a center punch, set the position of the hole in preparation for drilling. Prior to drilling, ensure there are no surfaces, such as cables or conduit, attached to the reverse of the purlin. To minimize the risk of injury, where provided by the manufacturer, always ensure the drill auxiliary handle is present and positioned correctly throughout all drilling operations. Using a 3/8 of an inch drill bit, drill through the purlin in preparation for riveting. Using an appropriate riveting tool, insert a 5/16 of an inch rivet into the corresponding fixing hole and secure the perpendicular purlin bracket into position. Prior to drilling and riveting the remaining fixings, using a spirit level, check the perpendicular purlin bracket is set at 90 degrees to the purlin. The single 5/16 of an inch rivet should have sufficient clamping force to minimize unintentional rotation during this process. Using the perpendicular purlin bracket holes as a template, drill through the diagonally opposing corner fixing hole, ensuring not to move the bracket. Insert and deploy a second rivet. Once the opposing corners are riveted, inadvertent orientation of the perpendicular purlin bracket will be eliminated. Complete the installation by inserting a total of 5 rivets into each perpendicular purlin bracket in the shape of an X. One or more of the additional holes may be used where the intended fixing holes cannot be used. A minimum of 5 rivets must be used for each bracket. Repeat the riveting process for the opposite perpendicular purlin bracket. Repeat the same process for the remainder of the perpendicular purlin brackets throughout the system as per the installation position and offset as detailed in the Kee Track system design specification. Parallel purlin bracket installation. Create a datum point from a wall or a feature of the building to establish the center line for the rigid rail. A datum is a physical point or position that you decide, serving as a reference or base for the measurement of other values. Prior to installing the parallel purlin brackets, consideration must be given to the trajectory of the hanger link arms onto which the rigid rail will be secured. Where obstructions such as plant, equipment and services will prevent the hanger link arms from joining together to form the central fixing position for the rigid rail, repositioning of the Kee Track system or purlin brackets must be considered. In addition to potential obstructions, consideration should also be given to the cantilever capability of Kee Track. Cantilevers up to and including 19 5/8 of an inch are permitted. Cantilever considered, mark the purlin to reflect the required position of the extremity parallel purlin bracket. Ensuring the hanger link arm fixing hole is positioned adjacent to the mark, align the bottom of the parallel purlin bracket with the underside of the purlin. Using the parallel purlin bracket as a template, mark the upper corner. Using a center punch, set the position of the hole in preparation for drilling. Prior to drilling, ensure there are no services such as cables or conduit attached to the reverse of the purlin. To minimize the risk of injury, where provided by the manufacturer, always ensure the drill auxiliary handle is present and positioned correctly throughout all drilling operations. Using a 3/8 of an inch drill bit, drill through the purlin in preparation for riveting. Using an appropriate riveting tool, insert a 5/16 of an inch rivet into the corresponding fixing hole and secure the perpendicular purlin bracket into position. Prior to drilling and riveting the remaining fixings, using a spirit level, check the parallel purlin bracket is set at 90 degrees to the purlin. The single 5/16 of an inch rivet should have sufficient clamping force to minimize unintentional rotation during this process. Using the parallel purlin bracket holes as a template, drill through the diagonally opposing corner fixing hole, ensuring not to move the bracket. Insert and deploy a second rivet. Once the opposing corners are riveted, inadvertent orientation of the parallel purlin bracket will be eliminated. Using the datum in conjunction with the rail trajectory, establish the position for the opposing extremity parallel purlin bracket. Unless the datum is staggered, the distance from the datum to the opposing extremity parallel purlin bracket will be equal to that of the first. Once both parallel purlin brackets are fixed in position, complete the installation by inserting a total of 5 rivets into each parallel purlin bracket in the shape of an X. One or more of the additional holes may be used where the intended fixing holes cannot be used. A minimum of 5 rivets must be used for each bracket. Repeat the riveting process for the opposing parallel purlin bracket. Following all extremity parallel purlin brackets, the adjacent purlin brackets must be positioned at 7 feet 10 inch centers from the extremities. This will ensure there are 2 consecutive assemblies present to secure the first section of rigid rail. The position and spacings between subsequent parallel purlin brackets, not exceeding the spaces shown in the table, shall be taken from Kee Track system design specification. Repeat the fixing process for the remainder of the parallel purlin brackets throughout the system. Hanger link arm assembly. For perpendicular installations, working from the Kee Track system design specification, identify the position of the hanger link arms being built, the individual components required, and their assembled center-to-center length. In this example, for position D, the following components are needed: one LA1000 and one LA500 with a corresponding arm length of 4 feet 1 inch. In cases where one or more individual perpendicular purlin brackets requires unforeseen repositioning, subsequent adjustment of the hanger link arm length shall be required to maintain the original rigid rail position. For parallel installations, working from the Kee Track system design specification, identify the position of the hanger link arms being built, the individual components required, and their assembled center-to-center length. In this example, the left hanger link arm assembly, XZ, uses two LA2000s with a corresponding arm length of 5 feet and 11 inches. In cases where the rigid rail position has been shifted either left or right within the purlins, the individual hanger link arms, left and right, may be different lengths to accommodate the offset rigid rail position. The remaining steps of the hanger link arm assembly are the same for both perpendicular and parallel installations. Working from the system design specification dimensions, where necessary, position the specified hanger link arms inside one another, ensuring that the M16 holes are parallel and in the same plane. Set the distance between M16 hole centers as prescribed in the system design specification. Once correctly positioned, insert a minimum of 4 M10 40mm bolts through the hanger link arm assembly with the bolt heads facing inwards. The bolt assemblies must be positioned as far apart as practicable and always with 2 bolt assemblies in each flange. Flat washers must be positioned beneath the bolt head, with additional flat and spring washers added prior to the nut. Once the hanger link arm assemblies are loosely bolted together, prior to tightening, confirm their assembled length is correct as detailed in the system design specification. Tighten all bolt assemblies to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. Repeat the process for all remaining hanger link arm assemblies for each position. Hanger link arm and clamshell assembly. Selecting the appropriate hanger link arm assemblies relative to their position as prescribed in the system design specification, loosely secure the hanger link arms using M16 50mm bolt assemblies. Bring the hanger link arm assemblies together to form a V. This will form the central bolting position onto which the slotted clamshell top brackets attach. Attach one of the slotted clamshell top brackets onto the outside of the hanger link arm assemblies and insert an M16 50mm bolt, ensuring a flat washer is positioned beneath the bolt head. Attach the second slotted clamshell top bracket to the rear of the hanger link arm assembly and loosely secure them together using the remaining M16 bolt assembly components. It is imperative that the slotted clamshell top brackets are attached either side of the hanger link arm assemblies. Hand tighten only at this stage. Attach a single half clamshell bracket to the underside of the slotted clamshell top brackets and secure into position using 2 M12 40mm bolt assemblies. In total, the clamshell assembly consists of 2 half clamshell brackets that clamp the rigid rail into a captive position. The half clamshell bracket should be orientated parallel with the direction of the rigid rail, ensuring the half clamshell opening is facing towards you in preparation to install the rigid rail. Prior to tightening the central M16 bolt assembly, using a spirit level, check the assembly is level. Tighten all bolt assemblies to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. Rail insertion and securing. Each section of rigid rail comes supplied with a single pre-drilled 9/16 of an inch end stop buffer hole. For all extremity positions, it is imperative that the rigid rail is orientated to ensure the end stop buffer hole is in the correct position, where the rail terminates. For all intermediate rigid rail sections, the end stop buffer hole position is not critical. Rail insertion is a two-person operation, and each operative should be positioned adjacent to or in close proximity of the fixed clamshell assemblies. Prior to raising the rigid rail into position, two additional half clamshells should be loosely positioned onto the top of the rigid rail. Assuming the opening of the previously fixed half clamshells is facing you in preparation for rail insertion, the additional half clamshells must be positioned slightly right of their proposed final position. This is imperative as the additional half clamshell brackets will slide along the rigid rail from right to left into the main body of the previously fixed clamshell assembly. To reduce the risk of the additional half clamshells from falling, consideration should be given to the utilization of temporary tethers. This could, for example, include the addition of a temporary anchor point secured into one of the threaded holes located on the side of the additional half clamshells. This in turn could be temporarily tethered to the hanger link arm assembly via a manufacturer-approved tool tether, webbing strap or lanyard. As the rigid rail is inserted into the fixed half clamshell brackets, slide the additional brackets into the fixed assemblies. Secure the half clamshell bracket using two additional M12 40mm bolt assemblies and, where utilized, remove the temporary anchor point and tethers in preparation for installing any subsequent sections of rigid rail. For all extremity rigid rail sections, install an end stop buffer and secure into place using an M12 100mm bolt assembly. Tighten all the bolt assemblies to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. To retain the rigid rail centrally within the clamshell assembly, insert 4 M10 20mm pinch bolts into the threaded holes that are located on the sides of the clamshell assembly. Care should be taken to ensure the individual pinch bolts are tightened evenly and sequentially so that the rigid rail is centralized within the clamshell assembly. Tighten all pinch bolts to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. Slotted washer. Before proceeding with the installation process, it is important to check the rigid rail is level and running true to the datum. Often, the structure onto which Kee Track is being installed will have a degree of inaccuracy, and minor on-site adjustments may be needed. In some situations, it may be necessary to shift the clamshell position either horizontally, vertically, or multi-directional to ensure the rigid rail is level and running true to its proposed position. In addition to any coarse adjustment achieved by on-site amendment of the hanger link arm length, the slotted adjustment washer can be incorporated into both purlin brackets at the interface with the hanger link arms. Installed at both purlin brackets, the slotted adjustment washer allows for significant multi-directional movement of the clamshell assembly and subsequent rigid rail alignment. Rail joining and bracing. Where two sections of rigid rail are to be joined with a rail splice directly adjacent to a clamshell assembly, ensure that a minimum of 4 inches of rigid rail protrudes beyond the clamshell assembly. Add a rail splice to the existing section of rigid rail that is being held captive by the fixed clamshell assemblies. Ensure that the rail splice is positioned onto the rigid rail to achieve a 4-inch overlap. This will ensure the adjoining section of rigid rail will similarly have a 4-inch overlap. Insert a total of 8 M10 20mm pinch bolts into the threaded holes that are located on both the sides and the top of the rail splice. To secure the rail splice in position, carefully tighten the 4 pinch bolts that are located on the fixed section of rigid rail only. Care should be taken to ensure the 4 pinch bolts are only tightened sufficiently to pinch the rigid rail during this step. Following the procedure for rail insertion and securing, install the next section of rigid rail into the respective clamshell assemblies. Prior to tightening the clamshell pinch bolts, slide the rigid rail through the clamshells into the open end of the rail splice. The two adjoining sections of rigid rail should touch one another within the rail splice. To secure the subsequent section of rigid rail, carefully tighten the additional pinch bolts that are located on the rail splice. Care should be taken to ensure the additional pinch bolts are only tightened sufficiently to pinch the rigid rail during this step. To finalize the rigid rail connection, the 8 individual pinch bolts should be used to manipulate the position of both sections of rigid rail within the rail splice. To ensure smooth trolley operation, it is imperative that the adjoining faces of both rigid rails are completely flush with one another, and the rail sits centrally within the rail splice. Finally, tighten all pinch bolts to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. Additional hanger link arm bracing. Parallel installations only. For Kee Track installed parallel with the purlins, additional hanger link arm braces must be added, positioned between the individual hanger link arms. Working from the Kee Track system design specification, identify the individual bracing components required and their assembled center-to-center length. In this example, for brace XY, the following components are needed: one TLA 1000 and one TLA 500 with a corresponding brace length of 4 feet 5 inches. Attach the hanger link arm braces to the hanger link arms using two M10 40mm bolt assemblies. Where bracing requires the assembly of multiple individual bracing components to achieve the specified total build length, ensure the braces overlap by a minimum of 2 holes. For all overlapping hanger link arm braces, a minimum of 2 M10 40mm bolt assemblies must be used per overlap to prevent rotation. Tighten all bolt assemblies to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. Finalizing the system. Ensuring the initial extremity end stop buffer assembly is installed, referring to the system design specification, slide the corresponding number of Kee Track trolleys into the open section of rigid rail. To retain the Kee Track trolleys within the rigid rail, install the second end stop buffer assembly. Tighten all bolt assemblies to the torque value shown in the torque settings table. Ensuring the rigid rail is free from contaminants, such as dirt and grease, apply the self-adhesive Kee Track branding sticker to the extremity of the rigid rail section. Final Kee Track checks. The Kee Track installation is now complete. Complete the Kee Track system tag and attach it in a position that is permanently accessible to the user prior to attaching to the system, or directly to the personal fall protection equipment that connects the user to the system. Prior to first use, a final inspection of Kee Track shall be undertaken in accordance with the examination scheme detailed in the IFU. Operating procedure. It is imperative that the following operating instructions are observed. Kee Track is suitable for multiple users, subject to its design and configuration. Do not use Kee Track if any components appear to be missing or damaged. The Kee Track trolley is designed for single-person use only. During use, it is imperative that the personal fall protection equipment onto which the user is attached to the Kee Track system is kept within a 30 degrees angle or less from vertical. Kee Track must be regularly inspected by a competent person in accordance with the manufacturer's examination scheme and local site and environmental conditions. Operators of Kee Track must be connected via approved and compatible personal fall protection equipment. Prior to each use, all personal fall protection equipment should be subject to a pre-use inspection as detailed by the manufacturer. Ensure a full body harness with rear dorsal attachment is used, and once fitted, all adjustable webbing straps are adjusted to ensure a supportive and comfortable fit. As a guide, the user should be able to slide an open hand between all webbing elements, but not a closed fist. All harnesses must be certified to the relevant standards. Ensure Kee Track and corresponding personal fall protection equipment inspection dates are verified and current. In situations where the user is likely to need to turn round repeatedly under the anchor point, personal fall protection equipment incorporating a swivel fitting should be used to avoid the lanyard twisting and untwisting. Where retractable type fall arresters are used as a component part of Kee Track, should the user's connector be out of reach, a proprietary reach pole system may be used to retrieve the user connector. Alternatively, a length of cord known as a tag lead can be attached directly to the swivel hook and allowed to hang down to where the user can reach it. Once retrieved, the tag lead can be removed and the swivel hook connected to the user's harness in the usual way. Upon completion of the work, the tag lead can be reattached and the fall arrestor allowed to retract back slowly. Before attaching to any personal fall protection equipment or Kee Track, inspect the system tag to verify the inspection status is shown as pass or conditional pass and within date of next inspection. Do not connect to the personal fall protection equipment or Kee Track if any other condition is noted. In the case of retractable type fall arresters, such as a self-retracting lifeline, where provided by the manufacturer, inspect the fall indicator for signs of activation. Visual fall indicators are often incorporated into the swivel hook of many self-retracting lifelines to provide an indication of a possible fall event. Inspect the spring tension by pulling the lifeline out fully and allowing it to retract fully. Ensure the retracting function is operating smoothly and fully prior to checking the lock-up function of the brake mechanism. Retract the cable or webbing fully and inspect it for damage. Carefully inspect the connector, which could be a snap hook or a carabiner, for damage, functionality, and markings. All connectors must be devoid of physical damage such as cracks, sharp edges, burrs, and deformation. All locking mechanisms must be functional and devoid of corrosion, which affects both the operation and strength. All markings included but not limited to approvals, manufacturer's markings, traceability should be present and legible. Before attaching to the personal fall protection equipment and subsequently to Kee Track, so far as reasonably practicable, check that the trolley runs freely within the Kee Track system. Due to the position of the rear dorsal ring attachment, it is often difficult to reach behind the back to attach personal fall protection equipment. Consideration should be given to utilizing a competent second operative for the attachment of the connector. Alternatively, in situations where the user is unlikely to need to turn round repeatedly under the anchor point, a short extension lanyard conforming to BS EN 354 or equivalent may be practicable. By attaching a short extension lanyard to the rear dorsal attachment before donning the harness, the free end of the lanyard becomes an extended attachment point, to which it is relatively easy to connect. Make sure all the connectors are correctly and securely attached prior to using Kee Track. During use, it is imperative that the personal fall protection equipment which attaches the user to the Kee Track system is kept within 30 degrees or less from vertical, or a working radius not exceeding that specified by the manufacturer. Excessive offset beyond 30 degrees may cause the personal fall protection equipment to malfunction or introduce a pendulum swing fall scenario that may result in injury. For technical support, contact technical@keesafety.com.